Hello, everyone, and welcome to another digital program presented by Historic Beverly. Today, we're going to be taking a virtual walking tour down one of Beverly's most beautiful streets, Thorndike Street. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Beverly at the time that Thorndike Street was named. And while we do so, I'm going to let you look at this beautiful hand-tinted postcard of Thorndike Street that's here in our collection. You should see that pop up on your screen in just a moment. Here we go. Now, the first house on Thorndike Street was built in 1842, roughly at the midpoint in a century that saw great expansion and significant events for the country as a whole, as well as for Beverly. For the United States, the population grew from about 5.3 million to 76 million. 29 states were added to the Union, 3 wars were fought, and 24 presidents served the nation. In Beverly, the population grew from about 3,900 to 13,900. Industry expanded beyond fishing to include manufacturing. Retail shops and services were opened. The railroad came to town. Men went to war. Roads were built. Public buildings were erected. And in 1895, Beverly became a city. As it grew, the town adjusted and adapted to both national and international events. The Embargo Act of 1807 closed foreign markets to Beverly's fishermen, and the War of 1812 closed the harbor to all but armed privateers. These events left sailors and fishermen who depended on foreign trade out of work, and it stopped the import of many necessities. The result was an increase in and the further development of local manufacturing. Cotton goods continued to be produced in North Beverly, while shoemaking, which was an at-home occupation at the time, employed idle sailors and fishermen. Beverly's manufacturing abilities were expanded to include rubber goods, rope for ships, and pewter. As the town took on new opportunities and the population grew, new streets were needed. According to Edwin M. Stone's History of Beverly, 43 streets, courts, and squares were named in 1838. One of these was Thorndike Street, named after one of Beverly's most prominent citizens, Israel Thorndike. Born on April 30th, 1755, here in Beverly, he was the 4th child of Andrew and Anna Morgan, and part of the 5th generation of the Thorndike family to live in Essex County. In 1761, his father was lost at sea, and Israel was left with an inheritance of just £1, 4 shillings. However, by the time of his death in 1832, he was a self-made millionaire with an estate valued at $1.5 million at the time of his death. Today, a conservative estimate puts that at about 500 to 600 million. His successful career began when he was just 16 and went to sea. A quick learner, he moved up in the ranks to serve as the commanding officer of a series of privateer vessels, including the Warren and the Resource during the American Revolution. And for those who don't know, privateers were independently owned ships that were authorized to attack and capture enemy vessels during times of war. Thorndike then invested his profits in a business partnership with his future brother-in-law, Moses Brown. They specialized in shipping to and from the East Indies and China. He was also involved in the building of the first Beverly-Salem Bridge. And according to Edwin M. Stone, Thorndike's sagacity, judgment, industry, strict attention to business, and thorough acquaintance with the details of every commercial enterprise in which he engaged were the chief causes of his success. At age 22, he married Mercy Trask, with whom he had 2 children. She died in 1783, and a year later he married Anna Dodge. They had 12 children. Of his 14 children, 10 would survive to adulthood. And he did marry once more in 1818 to Sally Dana, and she would survive him. He was a Federalist who favored a strong central government and was active in politics. In 1788, he was sent as a delegate to the Massachusetts Constitutional Convention, and he was subsequently elected to the legislature 13 times. In 1792, he purchased a brick building from Lydia Cabot, the widow of Andrew Cabot, to serve as his home for $6,200. Over time, he acquired several tracts of land to extend the property all the way to the ocean. And today, that building is known as Beverly's City Hall. And seen here are two portraits of Israel Thorndike. On the left, we see a young Israel, and on the right, we see an older Thorndike in the midst of his success. Here we have a postcard featuring City Hall. Now, it was built in 1787, actually for Andrew Cabot, one of the Cabot brothers. It was one of 3 brick Federalist homes built by Andrew and his brothers, John and George. And of course, the John Cabot House today serves as the headquarters for historic Beverly. After Thorndike purchased the property, he extended the property down to the ocean. He planted many flowers and fruit trees. And as a whole, the property extended roughly about 20 acres. The brick was painted white, and there was a circular drive at the front door for horses and carriages to pull up to. And Lucy Larcom described the house in her book, A New England Girlhood, by saying it was the finest house in town, a 3-story edifice of brick painted white. There was a spacious garden behind it from which we caught glimpses and perfumes of unknown flowers. Over its high walls hung bowls of splendid yellow sweet apples, and beyond the garden were those wide green fields that reached eastward down to the beach. It was one of those large old estates which used to give to the very heart of our New England coast towns a delightful breeziness and roominess. So the house really was considered quite a grand estate here in downtown Beverly. And although he moved his family to Boston in 1810 to be nearer to his business interests, he did keep the Beverly home as a summer residence until his death. And in 1817, his friend, James Monroe, actually visited him here at his home in Beverly and took breakfast with him here at City Hall. As we mentioned before, Israel Thorndike did pass in 1832, and after that, his widow sold the building to the city for $46,500. It was remodeled and has been used continually as City Hall since 1841. And now here we see a black and white photo of City Hall prior to some of the more recent remodels that were done, and it really gives a sense of what the house may have looked like when the Thorndike family lived there. Here, of course, we see a more modern color photo that shows how City Hall looks today from the front. We can see the white brick paint has been removed, and a story has actually been removed as well from the house. And here we see a profile of City Hall from the side. We can see where the addition was built onto the building, indicated by the line coming down in the brick. It's also possible to see where the windows and doors were bricked over, and you can see that indicated by that yellow arrow. There was a door there, and then above that there were 2 windows that were since bricked over and filled in. As we move down the street, we come upon what used to be the site of the First Universalist Church. Now, from 1846 to 1894, this was the site of the First Universalist Church seen here in this photo. In the late 1700s, the Universalist denomination was founded, and it was founded on the principle that God would want salvation for everyone. And some members even rejected the idea of hell entirely. The belief of the universal salvation attracted many, and Beverly citizens formed the First Universalist Church in 1840. The first church was constructed here on Thorndike Street in 1846. However, by 1894, the congregation had grown to more than 200 families, and a larger church, which was built on Judson Street, was established. Unfortunately, we don't know when exactly the original church was demolished, But map plates here in the historic Beverly collection, dated to 1897, no longer show the church standing. So it's pretty safe to assume sometime between 1894 and 1897, the church was unfortunately torn down. Now, if you were to visit this site today, you would stumble across a parking lot. So the site where the church used to be currently serves as an assigned parking lot for Beverly government officials. And as one of our volunteers, Ed Brown, used to say quite often, they tore down paradise and put up a parking lot. And I like to show this photo as well here. This shows City Hall to the left, and then the church kind of more focused and centered in the photo. Really gives you a sense of just how close the church was to City Hall. As we move further down the street, we're going to stop by the home of Mr. Israel Trask, seen here. Now, Mr. Trask was born in Beverly on October 24th, 1786, and he died here on February 1st, 1867. Number 12 Thorndike was built in 1842 for him and was conveniently located to his workshop at 160 Cabot Street. Trask was a silversmith by trade who, according to legend, met a woman complaining that Jefferson's embargo, which was instituted before the War of 1812, meant that she could not replace her worn-out teapot. He told her to gather all of her old teapots and bring them to him, and then he would create her a fine new teapot, better than any one she would have been able to purchase. Through a different spinning process, his products, which were known as Britannia-ware, were lighter in weight, harder, and thinner than previous teapots had been. He also developed a new style of teapot, one that was oval rather than square, had wooden handles, usually made by Eben Smith, a cabinet maker here in Beverly who Trask partnered with. And the teapots were attractive rather than plain. They had some ornamentation on them. Israel Trask married 3 times, and 5 of his total of 7 children lived to adulthood. And in 1852, he actually had a house next door to him built for one of his daughters, Mary Ann, and her slaves so that they could come to Beverly and be close and near to him. Now, the house was built in the Greek Revival style, which was a building style that emerged in Europe and the United States in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. It took elements of classical Greek architecture and used them in a wide variety of buildings. And this style became especially popular in the United States right around 1820 and lasted for several decades. And the house still stands today. And so here we see a more modern photo of what the house looks like now, still very recognizable as the same house. And I do also like to show, I usually will point this out in the actual walking tour as we're heading over to Thorndike Street. So I popped it in here so that we wouldn't be missing out on it. This is a photo of the Israel Trask workshop located in the workshop as it looks today. So I like to add that in, although not on Thorndike Street. We usually do mention it as we walk down Cabot Street to head to Thorndike Street. So I wanted to pop that in and include that as well today. Now, if we jump back to Thorndike Street, we're going to take a look at number 24 Thorndike Street. Now, number 24 Thorndike was built for Zachariah Whitmarsh in 1865 in the Victorian Gothic Revival style. In 1858, Zachariah Whitmarsh served as a boatswain in the United States Navy aboard the USS Merrimack. And a boatswain is a ship's officer who is in charge of equipment and the crew, essentially. And now, if the name the USS Merrimack sounds familiar, it's because this ship actually took part in the famous Battle of the Monitor and the Merrimack. And so for those who aren't well-versed on Civil War history, just so we're aware, what happened was in April of 1861, when Virginia seceded from the Union, the Merrimack, which was a Union ship, was stationed in Virginia. And so in order to make her unusable, because they weren't going to be able to get the ship out in time, the Merrimack was burned to the waterline on April 20th, 1861 by federal forces as they withdrew from Norfolk, Virginia. The Confederacy, however, razed her and rebuilt and renamed her as the new ironclad warship, the Confederate State Ship Virginia. The battle itself of the Monitor and the Merrimack was indecisive, but the new metal-clad ships would forever change the way in which warships were built from here on out. And as I mentioned, the house was built in the Victorian Gothic Revival style. Now, this is a style that's very recognizable kind of when you see it. It's a style that sought to revive medieval forms. And this style occurred as industrialization progressed, in part because there was a reaction against the use of machinery in factory production. And so the style is really characterized as having heavy decoration, pointed arches, steep gables, large windows, things of that nature, things that would show hand craftsmanship and attention to detail. And so we can really see that in this house still. And this, of course, is a modern photo of the house, and so it does still retain several of those features today. Now we're going to look at the other side of the street now to take a peek at number 21 Thorndike Street. Now, number 21 Thorndike was built in 1891, and it served as the former armory for the Beverly, and especially for the Beverly Light Infantry. And now, in the early days of our country, the laws required that every white male citizen between the ages of 18 and 45 be enrolled in the militia and perform a certain amount of military duty. The Beverly Light Infantry was organized on June 5th, 1801, and over the years, the Light Infantry had several other homes, including an armory on Railroad Ave, and during its existence, men from Beverly responded to three major conflicts: the War of 1812, the American Civil War, and the Spanish-American War. And just as a little interesting fact, in April of 1861, when the Civil War broke out, the Beverly unit was one of the first militia units to report for duty in Massachusetts. And since Massachusetts was one of the first states to respond to the call for war, the Beverly militia may have actually been among the first in the nation to join the fight. And of course, as I mentioned, it was originally built as an armory. However, the building was also used for social, political, and sporting events. It was sold in 1905, not long after it was built in only 1891. And it was sold with the understanding that it would be used as a private residence. In 1906, the large meeting room was removed, and that's what we see off the back there. And the building was converted to a private residence, and today it now actually has condo units inside of it. And so this is what the building looks like today. Still recognizable, of course, that large meeting room on the back has been removed. And I also like to show the side of the building as well, just to really give you a sense of how once that back was removed, additional houses were constructed right behind the building. There's very little space between the back of what was the armory and new construction houses that were built there. And I wanted to show another hand-tinted postcard here in our collection of Thorndike Street, just because we have so many. As we kind of talk about the end of the street. Now, the street that was named after Israel Thorndike originally extended from where City Hall meets on the corner of Cabot down to Lovett Street, with houses on both sides of the road. Between 1862 and 1864, a Mr. William Whitney acquired the area of land between Lovett and Lothrop Streets, and all parcels around it, and the land between Lothrop Street and the ocean, so essentially connecting Lovett down to the ocean. He built a large house and created a small access road to his house on that property. However, in 1892, Whitney sold all his lots except for his house to George Swan and Horace Woodbury. And between 1895 and 1900, Swan and Woodbury built 4 houses on the lots, and the lower part of Thorndike Street was named Thorndike Avenue. However, in 1907, Thorndike Avenue had a name change and it officially became a part of Thorndike Street. And that does take us to the end of Thorndike Street, the road itself. However, I always like to end when we're walking back up the street and circle back to point out number 15 Thorndike Street and a fun little facet of the house. So here we see 15 Thorndike Street. And it really must be tough living on a street with so much history because number 15 Thorndike features a very small plaque on the side of the house, which upon closer inspection we can see reads, "On this site in 1897, nothing happened." Thank you so much for tuning in for this virtual walking tour of Thorndike Street. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little something. If you're interested in becoming a member, please feel free to go to the link provided there to join. Your membership supports our ability to be able to continue to create digital content for everyone and to continue to preserve Beverly's history. If you have any questions, I encourage you to reach out to us at research@historicbeverly.net. Any of the photos that you saw here today, you can find in our online collection. The little number next to it, you can use that at the link here, beverlyhistory.pastperfectonline.com, to search for those photos. And if you're interested in purchasing a reproduction of those photos, please feel free to reach out to us as well. Again, any questions or concerns, we'd love to hear from you, and we hope you attend another virtual walking tour soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.